And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Starting off tonight's weather, we've got a system up here coming out of the Russian Far East in the front, pushing into the northwest Bering Sea. Ridge of high pressure out ahead of that, making for light winds, dry conditions here from the Chukchi Sea down across St. Lawrence Island, right on into the Aleutians. And diminishing winds finally here for the Alaska Peninsula. Still some light shower activity going on the north side of the peninsula there, and then tapering off up toward the southwest coast. Dry over the west coast, and chance of snow for the Brooks Range, portions of the North Slope, and showers here over the interior with that trough, and then showers and rain with this trough along the North Gulf Coast into the Panhandle. This low continues to weaken and now kind of drifting eastward here. And then tomorrow kind of wobble back down to the southwest a little bit there. And that's going to continue to circulate moisture, mainly up along the North Gulf Coast now. Not as too far north. So it should be a drier day for northern Cook Inlet into the Matanuska Valley, Copper River Basin. Showers along this trough here, northern Kuskokwim Valley up toward the Yukon River. And isolated showers of rain or snow scattered across the North Slope and Arctic coast, and rain and showers again, eastern North Gulf Coast down across all of the Panhandle. Still another trough there out to the southwest. And this front now, and the whole system dropping southeastward here, and this pushes a chance of rain in toward the Pribilof Islands late in the afternoon, probably holding off till evening. Now the front dragging some moisture into the west central Aleutians, but maybe some partly sunny skies for the eastern Aleutians. Showers continue, but to a lesser extent for the Alaska Peninsula. Then on the day Thursday, that low center continues to drop southeastward here. So rainy overnight period tomorrow night and Thursday for the Pribilof, rain pushing into Nunivak Island early on Thursday and extending down to the Alaska Peninsula with some shower activity back behind, mostly north of the central Aleutians though. And low pressure continues to weaken, but still sitting here in the Gulf of Alaska, nothing really kicking it out as this next much stronger storm comes up from the southwest here toward the Queen Charlotte Islands. That'll begin to affect the Dixon Entrance area and extreme southern southeast coastal areas in the afternoon with a little bit of increase in the winds and precipitation there, but dry to the north. And for the coastal water forecast here for the south coast, south to southwest winds for tomorrow at 10 knots. East to southeast winds, 15 knots for the north coast, with seas up here 7 to 8 feet and 8 to 9 feet here for the south coast. Clarence Strait, south winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet, southeast winds 15 knots for Lynn Canal, and southeast winds at 10 knots for Stevens Passage. And then for the day on Thursday, big increase in the winds here, really depending on how far north that storm comes, exact track it takes. But right now, look for a pretty good increase in the winds here for the south coast. Out of the east, 25 to 35 knots with possible higher gusts. Southeast increasing to 30 knots for Clarence Strait. Otherwise, on the light side here for the central and northern inner channels. And for the central and north coast here, looking at east winds at 15 to 20 knots. Then for the day on tomorrow, Wednesday, Prince William Sound, east winds 10 knots, North Gulf Coast, east-northeasterlies at about 15, and north to northeast, 15 knots for Cook Inlet. Small craft advisories for the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay with west-northwest winds 25 to 30 knots, accompanied by 7-foot seas. And for Thursday, Cook Inlet, variable to west winds 10 to 15 knots. So looking at small craft advisories for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands for west-northwest winds at 25 knots. And light variable winds here for the western North Gulf Coast. East side though, east at 15, and Prince William Sound, light east winds at 10 knots and slight seas. Kodiak Island, northwesterlies 20 to 25 knots with 4 to 6 foot seas. In Bristol Bay, northwest, 25 knots there. And the Alaska Peninsula, about the same, northwest winds 20 to 25 knots, seas running 3 to 7 feet. And then for Thursday, for the peninsula here, looking at west-southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Bristol Bay, northwest at 20 with 5-foot seas. Kodiak Island, west winds in Chillicothe Strait turn northwest across the island at about 25 knots there with seas at 4 feet. And the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, northwest winds 20 to 25 knots with west-northwest winds at 20 knots for Adak and Atka. And then out to the west there, West-southwest winds at 25 knots with seas 6 to 7 feet. And for the day Thursday, western Aleutians, west-northwest winds 20 to 30 knots, seas a little higher now, anywhere from 8 to 12 feet out that way. Adak and Atka, southwest at 25 knots with 7-foot seas, and the eastern Aleutians, southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. For the southwest coast, Yukon Delta coast, northwest at 20 knots, Kuskokwim Delta, north at 20, St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound, also looking at north winds at 20 knots. And for the northern Bering Sea out here around St. Matthew Island, variable winds at 10 knots in the Pribilofs, northwest at 15. And then for the day on Thursday, St. Matthew Island, small craft advisories, winds east at 25, southwest 20 for the Pribilofs, northeast 15 for the Kuskokwim Delta coast. Pretty light winds there along the Yukon Delta coast, east at 10. Light north winds through St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, west winds 15 to 20 knots, and the central coast, light northwest breeze at 10. And then for the Chukchi Sea, western Arctic coast, north winds 15 to 20 knots with seas running 3 to 5 feet. And then for the day on Thursday for the Chukchi Sea, north winds 15 to 20 knots, seas running 4 to 5 feet, north at 10 knots with 3-foot seas for the western Arctic coast. And the central coast, northwest at 10 knots, seas at about 3 feet, and west winds 15 to 20 knots, so 3 to 5-foot seas for the eastern coast.